The wind carved its way through the auction yard like it held a grudge, dragging grit across the cracked boards and into the eyes of men who'd long since learned not to flinch. The noon sun beat down like judgment, silvering the dust that rose with every bootstep. Over by the holding post, a girl stood motionless, though "girl" was the word folks used when they didn't want to say "problem." Her hair was tangled like wildfire, all copper and dusk, and her face was set hard against the world. She didn't blink when the dust hit her eyes, didn't move when the old man with the auction bell barked her name like a curse. Lena. No last name, no origin spoken, just Lena. She wore torn men's trousers tucked into split boots and a canvas shirt damp at the collar from heat and sweat. Her hands were roped at the wrist in front of her, not tight, just enough to say she wasn't free. One ankle bore a rusted shackle chained to a post, more symbolic than secure. If she wanted to run, they knew she wouldn't bother with stealth. She'd blaze out of here like a match flung into prairie grass. She already had. Twice. The crowd was thinner than usual. Word had spread, "Don't bother." She'd been sold before, or close to it, and each time it ended in some man's ego getting bruised worse than his jaw. They called her wild, unbiddable, broken. But the truth was quieter, and no one wanted to name it. She'd bitten one man. She'd broken another's hand when he tried to unbutton her blouse. And in the last place she'd been kept, she'd ridden out at midnight on his best stallion and didn't come back till dawn, with the horse and a rifle, but not a word of where she'd been. So now she stood there, priced low, pride high. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow and tried again. Strong back, knows horses, doesn't spook easy, contracted work only. You break her, you keep her. Some laughter, some shame in it. That's when Wyatt Coleridge arrived. He came in from the south gate, quiet as dust, wore a brown hat pulled low and the kind of coat that didn't say much. Folks didn't part for him, he wasn't important enough for that, but they noticed him. Tall, sun-worn, with eyes like dry riverbeds, once deep, now empty. A rancher in trouble, folks said. Lost his wife 2 winters back to fever. Lost most of his cattle to drought. Just barely held on to his land up near Gallows Ridge. He looked at Lena like he was measuring weather. Not danger, just signs. Something in her posture, maybe. The way she didn't hide, didn't soften. The auctioneer perked up. "Coleridge, you looking for help?" Wyatt didn't answer at first. He walked to the post, stood a few paces from Lena and studied her like a man checking fence posts. Nothing personal, just necessary. Lena met his gaze. Not defiant, just steady. Her lip was split, days old. A bruise bloomed along one cheekbone. She didn't hide it. "What's your price?" Wyatt asked, voice low. 45, the auctioneer offered quickly. 35, if she acts up. She act up with you? Not directly, no. She sick? Never seen her take ill. She ride? The auctioneer hesitated. Better'n most. Too well, some'd say. Wyatt looked her over again. Then to Lena, not the auctioneer. You know work? I know it. Her voice was dry as bone. Not rough, not rude. Just used up. I don't keep dogs. I don't shout. I don't care where you've been. You want in, you pull your weight. If not, say so now. She didn't answer. He turned to the auctioneer. 30. 35. Take it or leave it. Fine. Take her. Wyatt reached into his coat, counted slow. Handed over coin. Lena's rope was undone. The chain dropped. She didn't move. Wyatt nodded toward his wagon, already half loaded with grain and supplies. You walk or ride? She glanced at the wagon. Bed, saw the mare tethered there, reins loose. A calm animal, older. She didn't answer, just turned and mounted without help. The crowd watched her ride away, back straight, expression flat. The road home was long and mostly silent. Dust swirled behind them, and the land rolled out like a forgotten prayer. Yellowed grass, dead cottonwoods, fences that bent in the wind, the kind of country where nothing was easy and everything was earned. Wyatt didn't try to speak. He was a man who believed in silence more than noise. He watched the sky instead, gauging clouds that hadn't rained in weeks. Lena sat behind him in the wagon bed, next to a sack of feed and a coil of rope. She didn't ask where they were headed. She didn't ask anything at all. Night fell before. They reached the ranch. It wasn't much to look at. 2 barns, one leaning, a house with a slanted roof and a fence line stitched together from hope and spare nails. The corral held 2 steers and a mule with 1 good ear. But it was clean. The porch swept. A lantern hung, burning low but steady. Wyatt pulled up and turned back. "You'll sleep in the barn," he said. "Upstairs, hayloft, clean straw. Wash barrel outside. You hungry?" She shook her head. "You eat when you are. There's bread by the stove." She didn't thank him. Just slid down and walked into the barn like it was hers by right. Wyatt stood for a while, hat in his hands. Then he went inside and shut the door. 3 days passed with little talk. Lena rose before dawn, fed the stock, mended what was broken without asking where the tools were kept. Wyatt let her be. But he watched. He saw how she stood beside the wild filly he'd never managed to saddle, how the horse calmed under her hand. He saw how she handled the axe. Swift, sure, no waste in her swing. He saw how she paused at the ridge each evening, just for a second, to watch the sun fall behind the hills like something remembered. On the 4th morning, he left a tin cup of coffee on the porch rail, said nothing, just went back to splitting wood. That evening, the cup was clean and left beside the door. On the 7th day, Maybelle arrived. His niece came bouncing off the mail coach like spring itself. Freckles, braids, 10 years old and all. Curiosity. She found Lena in the barn and said, bold as brass, "Are you the wild woman?" Lena looked up from brushing the mare. "I don't think I am." "Well," Auntie said, "you bite. Only fools." "Oh," Maybelle said, thinking hard. "I'm not a fool." "Then you're safe." Maybelle beamed. "I like your hair. Looks like a fox's tail." Lena blinked. For the first time, she smiled. Barely. That night, Wyatt watched them from the porch. Maybelle tracing something in the dirt with a stick, Lena beside her, quiet but not distant. A change so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. Near midnight, a storm stirred on the horizon, thunder low and slow like a drum calling from far away. Wyatt stepped out to check the barn, found Lena there, already tightening, the shutters, covering the feed sacks, brushing straw away from the drainage. "You hear it?" he asked. "I feel it." He nodded. She turned to go, then paused. "Why'd you buy me?" she asked, low, eyes fixed on the dark. He considered her for a long moment. "You looked like someone who don't need fixing," he said. "Just space." She nodded once, then walked up the loft ladder and disappeared into the hay. The first crack of lightning lit the hills like ghosts were dancing. In the barn, Lena watched it through a knothole, one hand resting on the wooden beam. Her jaw was tight. Her shoulders still held a memory of chains. But outside, under the eaves, Wyatt stood watch through the rain, silent, grounded, and there. She didn't know yet if he'd keep standing, but she'd seen enough men walk away. She'd wait, just a while, just long enough to see if he stayed. The storm passed like a slow, aching breath, leaving the land soaked and quiet in its wake. Morning came cold, the sky still heavy with clouds and the ground too soft beneath the boots. The ranch held its breath, fences sagging under the weight of the wet, the barn roof dripping like a clock ticking out time. Lena stepped into the light just before dawn, shoulders wrapped in a rough wool coat Wyatt had left folded on the hay rack. She hadn't asked for it. He hadn't said it was hers, but it was waiting for her all the same, and she took it without ceremony. Downstairs, Wyatt was already by the gate, knee-deep in the sucking mud, trying to mend where the cattle had pushed through. One calf gone missing, one steer standing, lamed from a night's panic. No words needed passing, just the kind of knowing. That settled between people who worked side by side and let silence do the talking. She joined him without being told, waded into the muck, hands on the fence post, weight braced against his. Together they lifted the broken board into place, her shoulder against the splintered edge, his hammer driving nails without hurry. The air between them was thick, not tense, but unspoken. The kind of distance that wasn't about fear anymore, but something softer, careful, like a bridge being built one board at a time. Later that morning, Maybelle found them both near the feed shed. Her hair was in wild tangles from sleep, and she rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, cheeks still soft from dreams. "Uncle Wyatt," she called, tugging at his sleeve. "The man with the red horse is back, the one from the town." Wyatt stiffened, then stood slowly. "Stay inside," he said to her, then turned to Lena. "You too." But Lena didn't move. Down the hill came a rider, easy in the saddle, reins loose in one hand. The horse was a sleek, rust-colored stallion, too fine for ranch work and too fast for show. The man astride it wore a long black coat and a smirk, carved into his face like it was born there. His hat tilted just enough to seem deliberate. His boots gleamed like he didn't know mud. Lena's hands clenched at her sides. "Ethan Brand," she said, voice like sand through teeth. Wyatt looked. "At here. You know him?" She didn't answer. The rider pulled up just outside the main gate, dismounted slow, like a man sure of the ground beneath him. "Well, well," he drawled. "Didn't expect to find you tucked away like a barn cat, Lena. I thought you'd be halfway to Kansas by now." Wyatt stepped forward. "State your business." Ethan smiled without warmth. "Just retrieving what's mine." "She's not yours," Wyatt said, steady. Ethan glanced at Lena, then back at Wyatt. "That's funny, because I paid for her. Twice, actually. Once in coin, once in time and trouble. She took something from me." "She took her freedom," Wyatt replied, "and you lost the right to speak her name when you laid hands on her." The silence that followed was thick as wet rope. Ethan laughed low. "Righteous, ain't you? Tell me, what is she to you? Farmhand? Pet? Or have you decided to play savior?" Lena stepped forward now, past Wyatt, chin high. "Whatever I am," she said, "I chose to be here. You don't get to choose for me anymore." Ethan's eyes flickered. Just a moment. Then he shrugged, turning toward his horse. "This ain't over," he said. "You're still marked. Don't forget that." He mounted, reins twitching in his fingers like a threat. "Next time," he said, "you won't see me coming." Then he was gone. Dust curling in the ruts behind him. Wyatt watched until the shape of him disappeared between the low hills, then turned back toward Lena, his face unreadable. "Why didn't you say?" he asked quietly. "Because you'd think." "I was still running," she said. "Ain't no shame in running from what wants to ruin you." Her breath caught. She hadn't expected kindness. Not in that moment. Not now. "I wasn't just running," she said, voice softer. "I was trying to remember who I was before he tried to own it." He nodded once. A long, slow thing. Then looked toward the hills again. "You're safe here," he said. "He comes back. I won't let him pass." She didn't thank him. That kind of debt was too heavy. But she looked at him differently after that. Not like a man who'd bought her, but like one who'd offered a gate with no lock. The days that followed passed with a different weight. Lighter in some ways, heavier in others. They worked close but rarely spoke of things that mattered. Wyatt gave her space. never touched. Her, without asking, never looked too long, never crossed the lines she hadn't drawn, but he somehow still saw. And Lena began to trust the quiet. In the cool dusk, she taught Maybelle to braid reins from leather strips. In the mornings, she rose early to water the garden and mend the chicken wire. She sang once, low, a tune without words, and Wyatt heard it from the porch and didn't say a thing, just listened with his hand over his coffee, still as a stone. 1. Evening, Lena took the wild filly from the pen. Wyatt stood at the fence watching, not interrupting. The filly had fire in her eyes and hooves that struck like thunder. No one had ridden her, not even Wyatt. But Lena didn't saddle her, just walked alongside, slow, hand on her neck, whisper in her ear. It took an hour, maybe, more, but she mounted bareback and rode once around the corral like she belonged there, hair flying like fire in the wind. Wyatt let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. When she slid down, he met her at the gate. "You broke her," he said. Lena shook her head. "No," she said. She just finally saw she wasn't in a cage. That night they ate by lamplight. Maybelle asleep upstairs, a quiet house, the stormy sky clear for the first time in weeks. Wyatt sat with his hands around a chipped mug, eyes far off. "She came here once," he said suddenly. "My wife. The first time I brought her home, she stood right there in that doorway and said, 'This place was too empty to feel like a life.'" Lena listened, not pushing, not retreating. "But over time," he continued, voice low, "she filled it. With color, with sound, with warmth." "And now?" Lena asked. "Now," he said, "it's just waiting." Lena stood then, slow, walked to the open door, looked out into the black, the stars sharp and silent above the land. "Maybe it's not waiting," she said. "Maybe it's listening." He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived there was no distance in it, no careful edge, just something almost tender. Almost. Outside, the wind stirred again. In the barn, the filly nickered low, and beyond the ridge, in the darkness that clung to the world's edge, a match flared to life. Too far to see, too close, to ignore. Ethan Brand was not gone, not yet, and the land between them, Wyatt, Lena, and the shadows chasing their heels, was growing thinner by the day. The wind had turned dry again, dry and sharp like it had something to say and wouldn't wait long to say it. By the end of September, the land wore a brittle hush, grass gone to gold, sky pale as old linen, and every shadow falling longer than it should. Lena rose early that morning. The wind had slipped through the cracks in the windows all night, curling through the house like a warning. Her boots found the floor with purpose. She moved through the kitchen without sound, lit the stove, stoked the coals, and stood with her hands wrapped around a tin mug, waiting for the day to begin. Wyatt hadn't spoken much in the last 2 days. Not out of anger. Something else. Something like waiting. Like listening, the way she'd once said the land might. But now it was him, and it was getting louder, whatever it was. By noon, he was out near the South Ridge, checking the posts where the creek cut through. The cattle had begun drifting, that way. Something in their bones, sensing what men sometimes missed. Change. Lena saddled the filly and rode up after him. The wind tangled her hair behind her, snapped her coat against her legs, and carried the smell of smoke far off. Not fire, yet, but something smoldering, something coming. She found him crouched at the far fence, his hat low, shoulders tight. He didn't look up when she dismounted. "Another stake pulled out," he muttered. "It was driven clean yesterday." Her eyes swept the ground. The stake was there, sure enough, half buried in trampled mud. But the prints weren't cattle. Too narrow. Too deep. Too deliberate. "Riders," she said softly. He nodded once. "Looks like 3. Maybe 4. Ethan? Could be, or someone paid by him. She swallowed. The air felt thinner up here. You said I was safe. You are, he said, standing now. I didn't say it would stay easy. They rode back without speaking. That night they double-bolted the barn doors. Maybelle was tucked in early, none the wiser, her lullaby softer than usual. Lena watched the child sleep for a long time, her cheeks flushed from the sun, her breath steady. She thought of the years Ethan had taken, not just from her, but from something gentler inside her she was only now beginning to reclaim. Downstairs, Wyatt was laying out his father's old Winchester on the table, polished, loaded, ready. You ever shot a man? Lena asked quietly. Wyatt didn't look up. Not yet. She moved closer. You mean to? If he leaves me no choice. She hesitated, then placed her hand over his. Steady, warm, not pleading, just presence. You're not alone, she said, and something in him seemed to uncoil then, not vanish, just ease, like a knot loosening in the gut. In the small silence that followed, the wind pushed against the door again, but neither of them turned. By the third morning, Ethan made his next move. A letter arrived, folded, sealed, pressed into the hand of a boy no older than 12. He'd written in bareback, dusty and wild-eyed, said a man in black gave it to him 2 towns east. Wyatt opened it at the porch. Lena stood close enough to read. It said, 1 horse, 1 woman. Dusk tomorrow at Red Willow. Bring her, and no blood. Refuse, and I come for the girl instead. You know I will. There was no signature. None needed. Wyatt folded the paper slow, like it might tear more than parchment. Maybelle watched from the window, eyes wide. Lena stepped off the porch, boots crunching dry dirt. I'll go. No, Wyatt said instantly, voice low. That's not a choice on the table. He'll hurt her. He won't get near her. Lena's jaw set. He means it. I know. She looked up at him then. Really looked. Not the hard lines of his jaw or the steady eyes, but the way his fingers trembled at the edges. Just barely. You'd kill for me, she said. Not a question. He didn't flinch. I'd rather not have to. They stood in silence, the wind whispering between them like it knew things they didn't. Finally, she said, Then let's make it so you don't. That night they rode out under a pale moon, no lanterns, no tracks left behind. Wyatt had told the boy to ride west until he hit the river and not stop till someone kind found him. Maybelle would be safe with the widow Walker and her sons for a night. The child had kissed them both without quite knowing why, just sensing the weight in the air. Lena didn't wear a dress. She wore what she'd always worn, dust and scars and the fire that never quite left her eyes. She rode the filly bareback again, said the saddle slowed her heart. Wyatt rode beside her. The Winchester slung behind. Him. His hand brushed hers once on the trail. Accidental, maybe. Or maybe not. They reached Red Willow just before dusk. It was a dry basin, ringed by crooked trees and red rock. The wind howled low through it like an animal not quite dead. Ethan was already there. Alone. Or appearing to be. His red horse gleamed like a warning. You brought her, he called out, smiling wide. I admit. I didn't expect you to be that foolish, McCrae. Wyatt didn't dismount. Let the girl go. Ethan laughed. What girl? Oh, you mean the child? She's somewhere safe. For now. Lena stepped forward, slow. I came, she said. So leave the rest out of it. He tilted his head. You always did love the dramatics. She kept walking. 10 paces, 15. Close enough now to see the twitch in his fingers. You never loved me, she said, voice soft as dusk. You loved owning something wild, he sneered. You were never wild, just broken, and I'm the only one who ever saw what you were really made of." "And Wyatt," she said, still stepping forward, "he sees too." "Sees what?" "That I'm not yours to fix, not his either, just mine." Ethan drew then, fast, but not fast enough. The shot cracked the canyon like thunder. Wyatt's aim didn't tremble. Ethan's gun clattered against stone. He dropped to one knee, clutching his shoulder, breath ragged. "Don't," Wyatt said, walking forward now, barrel leveled. "Don't move." Lena stood frozen. Ethan looked up, eyes furious. "You gonna kill me?" Wyatt stopped 5 feet away. "No." And then he turned to Lena. "It's your choice." She walked slow, every step shedding pieces of fear like dust from her boots. Stopped just before Ethan, looking down at him. "I choose to walk away," she said, "not because I'm afraid, but because I'm not what you made me anymore." He spat at her feet, but there was no weight left in him, only the sound of wind through red willow. She turned, mounted, and didn't look back. Wyatt followed. They left him kneeling in the dirt, not dead, but not whole either. And the wind, oh, the wind, it circled them as they rode home, curling in their hair, and whispering something like freedom, or maybe forgiveness, or maybe just the start of something they didn't yet have the words for. The morning after Red Willow was silent in a way the land rarely managed. No birdsong, no breeze. Just the hush that comes after something hard has been earned, but not yet understood. The kind of quiet that feels like a held breath before something sacred. Lena woke to it and didn't speak. Neither did Wyatt. He brewed coffee like always, hands steady, eyes tired but clear. She sat across from him, her palms wrapped around the mug, heat seeping through her knuckles, her spine straight despite the ache that lived just beneath her skin. They didn't need to talk about Ethan. He'd lived, and that was enough. Justice, mercy, or unfinished business, whatever it was, they had left it in the dust behind them, choosing peace over fury. It wasn't a clean choice, but it was a free one. Maybelle came back that afternoon, toddling down from the hilltop behind Mrs. Walker's wagon, her hands filled with wildflowers and her grin as wide as the prairie. When she saw Lena, she ran, arms stretched out like wings. Lena knelt, arms wide. They crashed together in a tangle of warmth and little girl laughter. Wyatt stood nearby, watching, his jaw clenched like he was trying to hold something still inside. Him. "She missed you," he said when Maybelle had run inside to show the flowers to the barn cat. "She saved me," Lena replied. They stood in the yard for a long time, the sun warm on their shoulders, the wind finally quiet. "Are you staying?" he asked, not looking at her. "I haven't thought of leaving," she answered. It was the truth, and it scared her, how easy it was to say. That night she saddled her horse alone. Didn't say where she was headed. Just nodded to Wyatt when he opened the barn door for her. The land stretched quiet and waiting before her, moonlight slicking the hills in silver. She rode high up the ridge to where the old dead tree forked like fingers into the sky. It was a place she'd found weeks back, when the world still felt like a threat. Now it felt like a question. She dismounted and sat in the dirt. Let the horse graze nearby. Let the silence hold her. She thought of who she'd been. The girl thrown in the mud. The woman used like a mule, discarded like a rumor, but those were just pieces, fragments scattered across a trail she didn't owe anyone. She watched the stars burn, listened to the slow heartbeat of the earth. When she heard the hoofbeats, she didn't startle. She knew it was him. Wyatt dismounted quietly and sat beside her, not touching, not speaking, just there. She breathed in deep. "You always this good at finding people?" He gave a quiet chuckle. "Only when I know they're trying to be found." She smiled barely. "I'm not sure I know what I'm trying." "That's all right," he said. "Most of us don't." Another silence passed, but this one was different. Easier. Your land, she said. It's not just dirt, it's story. He looked at her. So is yours. She met his gaze. You still want me here? With everything? He didn't answer fast, didn't rush. Just let the question settle between them like dust before rain. Want? He said finally. Want is too small a word. The wind stirred then, soft and slow. I need someone beside me, he said. Not behind, not waiting. Someone who sees the storms coming and doesn't flinch. She looked back toward the house, far below. Just a pinprick of light in the dark. That girl, she said. The one they called wild. The one they said. Couldn't be tamed, he nodded. She wasn't wild, Lena said. She was just never asked where she wanted to ride. He turned his head, watching her. Something gentle in his eyes. Something strong. Where do you want to ride, Lena? She took a breath, then another. With someone who rides beside me, she whispered. He reached out then, took her hand slow, steady, the calluses of his fingers against hers. No fire, just warmth, just truth. She didn't cry, not quite, but something opened, something she'd kept locked tight behind ribs and memories. They sat like that until dawn. Weeks passed, then months. The ranch changed in small ways first. A second saddle hung beside Wyatt's, a new garden patch behind the barn, a carved nameplate on the door that read Maybelle's Room, made by Wyatt's own hand. Lena didn't become someone new. She just became someone whole. She taught Maybelle to ride, slow and sure, hands gentle, voice softer than it used to be. She repaired the broken latch on the west pasture gate herself. She rode the fence lines without being asked. Wyatt let her lead when she needed to, rode quiet behind her, a presence she could trust like the earth underfoot. Some nights she woke, from dreams of Ethan, his voice sharp, his hands like iron. But those dreams faded faster now, and in their place came the sound of laughter, of Maybelle singing to the goats, of Wyatt talking low to the horses before dawn, of belonging. And sometimes Wyatt would read aloud from the book she found in town. His voice slow, steady, like it came from the land itself. She'd sit beside him, head on his shoulder, listening to words she'd never believed she'd earn. One night, after a long day of branding, Wyatt came in from the barn, dust in his hair, sweat on his collar. She was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, baking bread that smelled like the childhood she never got. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You happy?" he asked, not like a demand, but like a prayer. She turned, flower on her cheek. "I'm not scared anymore." He kissed her then, slow and certain, like it wasn't the first time, like it wouldn't be the last. Outside, the stars spun quiet above the plains. Inside, the girl once labeled too wild was no longer trying to prove herself tame. She was home. And the man who had once bought her out of necessity now knew he'd never truly owned a thing. He just found something worth riding beside, and she'd finally found a place where no one asked her to shrink, only to stay. If you've ever felt like the world labeled you wrong, like you were too much, too wild, too broken, remember this. You were never meant to walk behind anyone. You were born to ride beside them, and someone, somewhere, is just waiting to see you as you are, not as a burden, but as a blessing. If this story found you, if it spoke to something in you, don't ride off quiet. Tell us where you're watching from. Like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more stories waiting by the fire. Until next time, Rider, keep going. You're not alone. Out there,